In this video number 24, we are going to discuss the next topic, environment. So how do we define environment? It is the total planetary inheritance and the totality of resources. Totality of resources, that means it includes the biotic and the abiotic factors that influence each other and are interdependent. That means they depend on each other. So what are these biotic elements? They are the living components, that is birds, animals, plants, etc. And the abiotic elements are the non-living things, which include air, water, sun, land, mountains, etc. So what does this environment do? Let's look at in the functions. The first and the most important function is that it supplies resources. And that is what is in the definition, isn't it? The totality of resources. So that's the most important function of environment, that it supplies us with resources. Resources which are renewable and non-renewable resources. So what are renewable resources? This is one of the most important ones that is generally asked in the examinations. The difference between renewable and non-renewable resources. So renewable resources are those resources that do not deplete, renew. That means they can be made, they can be got again and again. That means even after repeated use, they don't get exhausted. Like forests and fishes, etc. So there are so many that can be renewed. And non-renewable resources are those that will deplete with extraction and use. So the more we use them, the lesser they will be available for use. For example, the fossil fuels. We are all aware of the availability of coal and petroleum now, oil, etc. And why resources? Because they are used as inputs for producing goods and services. Inputs, otherwise called raw materials, for producing goods and services. The second function is that it assimilates waste. Assimilation meaning absorption. The waste that is generated during production and consumption activities. During production process, a lot of waste is generated, and activities of consumption also generate waste. So this generation of waste occurs in the form of garbage. An environment absorbs this waste created by the activities of production as well as consumption. The third is that it sustains life by providing genetic and biodiversity. Meaning what? It means that the sun, water, air and soil, they help in sustaining life, in maintaining life on the earth. So presence of these elements correspond to sustenance of human life. And the fourth, that it provides aesthetic services. Aesthetic services, these are the elements that improve quality of human life. You all have experienced that on a vacation, we people go out to enjoy nature. For example, land, seas, oceans, rainfall, deserts, mountains that make the surroundings beautiful and refreshing. So why do we go to hill stations during a summer vacation? Is because it provides us with aesthetic services. Just now we learned life is sustained on the earth because of the above functions. Now, environment is also able to perform those functions without any interruption as long as the demand on these functions is within its carrying capacity. That is, when the rate of resource extraction exceeds that of regeneration, we come across a situation called environmental crisis. And that is what we are going to learn over here. So what is environmental crisis? When the rate of resource extraction exceeds that of regeneration, we land up in environmental crisis. What are the reasons for this environmental crisis? There are two very large reasons. They are the increasing population and increasing production and consumption activities. Since these activities we learned, they generate waste, and then the earth also has some assimilating power. Beyond that, we land up in environmental crisis. So what is this absorptive capacity? It is the ability of the environment to absorb degradation. So before industrialization, pollution was within the absorptive capacity. Now after industrialization, there is so much waste that is generated that we are going beyond the absorptive capacity of the environment. Now let's understand what is carrying capacity. It is the amount of natural resources which can be drawn from and the maximum amount of pollutants that can be discharged without damaging it seriously. That means the industrial development must be in accordance with the carrying capacity of the environment. So what are the consequences of environmental crisis? The first is that polluted and dried up aquifers. What are these aquifers? These are those which provide us with water, like the rivers, lakes, ponds, etc. Nowadays, we do witness the dried up aquifers, or let us say the other condition is when we have rains, then incessant rains that cause floods. So these are all the consequences of environmental crisis. The second one is exhausted renewable and non-renewable resources. So we are exhausting with the renewable and the non-renewable resources because we are not giving enough time to the environment to recoup with them or renew these resources. Then the third consequence is poor quality of air and water. This means that air and water now produce air and waterborne diseases. So we are facing this problem throughout the country or throughout the world, we can say that this poor quality of air and water are causing diseases. All this means that there is an increased opportunity cost of the negative environmental aspect. What is this opportunity cost over here? These are the costs of opportunities foregone. That is, by choosing harmful environmental practices, we have foregone such environment practices which produce a positive effect on environment. Such a choice has resulted in increasing the opportunity cost. What type of choice? That we have chosen negative or harmful environmental practices. Right. The fourth one is global warming and ozone depletion, which contribute to increased financial commitments for the government. Why? Because of this, there will be certain adverse effects to combat which the governments will have to spend a lot of money. Now let's understand what is global warming. We have been learning about global warming since our childhood, isn't it? It starts even right from third class. We learn global warming, the rise in temperatures. So global warming is nothing but a gradual increase in the average temperature of Earth's atmosphere, due to which the greenhouse gases, what are these greenhouse gases? Carbon dioxide, methane, etc. Now in the examination, generally there is a 1-mark question that is asked on the greenhouse gases, which are carbon dioxide and methane. Then burning fossil fuels. What are these fossil fuels? Coal and petroleum are fossil fuels. Deforestation, which is an increase in carbon dioxide levels, which results in an increase in the carbon dioxide levels. When there are forests, the forests, we learned in our science classes that trees provide us with oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide. So here, when the deforestation takes place, the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere increase, thereby increasing the temperature. Let's now understand the effects of global warming. The temperatures have already risen by 1.10 degree Fahrenheit every year, which is 0.60 degrees Celsius. There is a rise in the sea level due to melting of ice. This melting of ice is possible only because of the sun's heat. Nothing else can melt the polar ice. So because the temperatures are increasing, there is a rise in this ice melts and there is a rise in the sea level. Then the next is the extinction of species. Many species which live in such areas where the temperatures are cold get extinct because the temperatures are rising. On the other hand, those animals which live in warmer areas, there also, since the temperature rises beyond a certain limit, we find extinction of species. Then because of global warming, there are tropical storms and an increase in the incidence of tropical diseases also. Now let's understand what is ozone depletion. Ozone depletion is reduction in amount of ozone in the stratosphere, and which is caused by high levels of chlorine and bromine compounds. These chlorine compounds are CFCs or chlorofluorocarbons, which are used as coolants in our refrigerators, and bromofluorocarbons, which are used in fire extinguishers. Now, ozone depletion results in UV radiation, increase in UV radiation, which is quite damaging for living organisms. And this UV radiation causes skin cancer in humans and a lower production of phytoplanktons. Phytoplanktons means plants that live in the water and other aquatic organisms. That means those animals that live in water bodies. So those were the harmful effects of ozone depletion.